And I want to let you know that some people will say, the law was done away with. It was nailed to the cross. I want to let you know something, and this is a shock to me when I heard it. There's actually 2 laws that is written in the Bible, and they're greatly confused. Let's look at them. In Exodus chapter 31, it says, He gave Moses, talking about God, 2 tablets of the testimony, tablets of stone written with the finger of God. Deuteronomy 31. So it was when Moses had completed writing the words of this law in a book. So it says Moses written a law in a book. And then he says, take this book of the law, take the book of the law, and put it beside the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, that it may be there as a witness against you. And so the 10 Commandments are written in stone. When we say to our kids, I want you to clean your room by 7, and that's written in stone, what are we saying? We're saying it's not changing. At 7, if you fail to do this, something is going to happen. A consequence is going to happen. And that's exactly what it was. The way I see it was that God wrote commandments on stone, that we should keep them, and then He wrote curses and consequences in the book of the law, that if we failed to keep those, then the consequences would kick in. And in Daniel chapter 9, he talks about 2 different laws. He says, Yea, all Israel have transgressed thy law, talking to God. They have all transgressed thy law, even by departing that they might not obey thy voice. You see, he puts God's law and God's voice in the same category because God actually spoke the commandments from the mountain to all the people of Israel. It's only when Moses went up the mountain that he was given the law to write in a book. And so they all heard his voice. Therefore the curse is poured out upon us, and the oath that is written in the law of Moses. So here it's saying that the curse is written in the law of Moses, the consequences of sin. I want to show you this. It shows you how the character of God. On one side it shows you God is, and in the middle it says God is good, God is holy, God is just, God is perfect. And there's all the scriptures to show you where they are. But in the same breath, it says the law is the same thing. And so if you want to say, I shouldn't follow the law, then you're saying I shouldn't follow God, because that's who His character is. God is without sin, is that correct? So if God is without sin, and sin is transgressing the law, then what does that mean? It means God follows the law perfectly. We cannot, so that's why we need a Savior. So I want to tell you a little bit about our road, now that I've laid the background a little bit. My son got baptized September 3rd, 2011. And before he was baptized, we went through some vigorous studies with Pastor Stan, and he taught us many things. And he said, Pastor, Dad, I want to be baptized. And we were like, okay. But then one night, I took him aside and I said to him, not to discourage him, but to just let him know. I would like him to go in knowing everything, right? Isn't that the way you should do it? Not let our kids be following something through tradition or through something we don't know, but teaching them everything so they can make a right choice. And I said to him, do you know what happens immediately after you're baptized? And he said, what? And I said, well, let's go to the Bible and we'll see. And so I want to show you what happens immediately after you're baptized. And I don't mean infant baptism, because infant baptism is they're doing something and they don't know what it is. And so there's no threat there. But when you're an adult and you choose and you say, I'm going to follow God and I'm going to put away all these things of the world, then you become a threat, because in the book of Job we see why bad things happen to people. And maybe I should lay this story down first. Job was a man who had mighty flocks. He had countless animals, and back then that was like money. And he had many children, and he followed God as best he could. And he repented of his sins all the time. It tells you that in the book of Job. He even repented for his sins of his children. But his children did not follow God, and they were very, very reckless, I guess you could say. And so there was in this heavenly court, God was there with the sons of God, whoever that is, I don't know, heavenly beings. And Satan came among them, and he said, I have come from walking all over the world. Basically saying to God, I own the world now that sin is transpired. And God says, well, have you considered my servant Job? He is blameless and upright in all his ways. He follows me. And then Satan said, well, of course he follows you, because you put a hedge on him. You protect him. Take that protection down. Let me in, and I'll show you that he'll rebuke you. And so God, he's on trial. He needs the universe. The other heavenly beings need to see who is right and who is wrong. So God said, okay, I'll let my protection down, and I'll let you in there, but you can't kill him. And so Satan went in there. Actually, the beginning was that he made man go and kill all his cattle and all his flocks. That means stealing all his money. That was his income. They killed his children through tornadoes. And this was all the doing of Satan. It wasn't God. And so when you see tornadoes in the world and you see people being murdered and things like that, and you say, how is there a God that he does all these things? It's not. It's because Satan is challenging him, saying, let me in there and I'll show you that people will turn away from you. And how many people turn away from God because of these things they see? Most people. Lots of people turn away because they say, how is this a God? I don't want to serve him if he's going to be like that. And so Satan challenges him. Satan creates boils to appear on his skin, and he puts Job through tremendous agony. And it was all the doing of Satan, because Job was a threat. Job followed God, and he became a threat. If you're not a threat, well then your life is probably going pretty good, maybe. I'm not sure. If you're starting to question your life, and you're starting to question, is this all there is to life? It's not satisfying for me. You're starting to become a threat then. And then your life might be falling apart a little bit. But in the end of the story, God blesses Job, and he has more children, and he has more, and so the story is really good. But let's look at what happens when you're baptized. Matthew chapter 3. Talking about Jesus. When he had been baptized, Jesus came up immediately from the water, and behold, the heavens were opened to him, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting upon him. And suddenly a voice came from heaven saying, this is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. And so here Jesus is baptized. And so immediately what happens? Matthew chapter 4. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit, by God, into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And so immediately, if you could see behind the scenes, God is saying, this is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased, and then Satan would say, well, of course he is. Take down your protection from him, and let me get to him, and we'll see where he's at. And so God says, okay, well, let's see. And so then the devil comes in and starts tempting Jesus. And you can read that in Matthew chapter 4. And so I told my son this. When you become baptized, you're a threat now. The target is on you. And so are you prepared for that? And he said, yes, I am. I want to be baptized. And so we went. And he was baptized September 3rd, 2011. And I want to tell you something about the men here. Now I'm talking to you men now. As a young man growing up, there was a show called The Simpsons, and I still remember this because it made me so mad when I was young. And they'd have a guy, Ned Flanders, on there. Do you remember him? And he was always the geek because he followed God. It wasn't because of the car he drove, or it was because he was a Christian. But let me ask you, is David, the young man that slayed the giant, is he a geek? Is he a weak man? He went when the whole nation of soldiers was saying, we're not going to fight that guy. He's too strong for us. He was raised in the art of war. Is Samson, was he a young weakling that when a lion attacked him, he slew it with his own hands? Oh, he wasn't. He was a strong man. And God gave him that strength. Again, Samson at the bottom. He was taken into the Philistines' temple because it's a long story, but God removed his strength for a little bit. Samson was the strongest man that ever lived, by the way. And his strength was in his hair. And so they cut his hair off. And so then God removed his strength. And so he was brought as a captive to the Philistine temple. And they were laughing at him and saying, "Where's your God now? You're weak. We've overtaken you." And back then, if they taken a man that followed God, then their gods were stronger than your God. And so, as he was sitting there, he was sitting between the two pillars, the main pillars of the temple. And he said, "Lord," he said, "give me my strength one more time, and I will crush your enemies under your feet." And so with one last strength that he had, that God had given him, he put his arms against the pillars and he pushed, as you can see in that picture. And he made the temple collapse, and he killed all those Philistine people that were against God. So now, I just went to the hill at Little Red, and this was the hill that my son tried to slide down. As you know, on March 3rd, we went sliding. We came here. We were waiting for some other kids to show up, and when we felt it was time to go, Pastor Stan said, "Does anybody want to have a prayer?" And so my son, "I do. I want to have a prayer." I said, "Okay." And before we left, my wife said, "People have gotten hurt there before, so you guys should maybe even not go, or you should be careful." My son said, "I want to go. I want to go real bad." So we went. I really didn't want to go, to be honest, but he wanted to go. So we went. And he said the prayer, and he said, "Lord, please protect us, because we know that people can get hurt there. But please protect us as we go there." And as you can see, this hill is very narrow. And you can see the red arrow. That's the tree that he hit. And as you see, if the angle that he came down, that just picture snow and things built up there as well, how much of an angle he was at when he was laying against that tree. As we got to the kids came and got us, and as we got to the hill, he was just laying against the tree, and he was coming in and out, his eyes. He couldn't respond to me. I'd say, "Are you okay?" And he would just look at me, and his eyes would go back, and then I'd have to say, "Wake up, wake up." And so I started praying with him right away, because the first thing I thought of was his prayer in the church. And I thought, you prayed for protection. What happened? Right? What happened? I had taught my son what happens after you're baptized, but at that moment, at that moment, doubts creep into your mind. What happened? I knew it happened. I knew he was a threat. I knew that, spiritually speaking, he was not well liked. And he hit that tree, and he was laying there, and his nose, one nostril had a little bit of blood around it, and he just couldn't respond. He just moved his arms, his legs, he never really moved. So we called 911. And they came speedily. By the time when you're in that moment, you're thinking, boy, they're taking forever. But they must have been there within 15 minutes, and that's pretty good. And then they did really well. They carried him down so good. And they were very careful. And they brought him to the hospital in Prince Albert. And we were there, I don't know how long we were there, half an hour or so. And the doctor said, "There's bleeding in his brain. We have to rush him to Saskatoon because we have really nothing that we can do here." And so this is what he looked like when he was in the ambulance. They had a neck brace on. They didn't know whether his spine was damaged or what. But they said, "We need to get him to Saskatoon right away." An hour later, he was gone, and we followed.